This is a story about fire and lightning and a girl who learned to make them indistinguishable. This is a story about 36 fires set over 5 years on the Morrison plantation in Georgia. Fires that destroyed cotton warehouses and tobacco barns and overseer houses and the master's library. Fires that caused $180,000 in damages, equivalent to $6 million today. Fires that bankrupted one of the wealthiest plantations in the state and led to the dispersal of 141 enslaved people to better circumstances. Every single fire was blamed on lightning strikes, because every single fire was set during thunderstorms when the sky was already burning and the rain was falling, and no one thought to suspect the 14-year-old kitchen girl named Sarah, who worked near the hearth and understood fire better than anyone realized. Between June 1853 and November 1858, 5 years and 5 months, Sarah became one of the most successful arsonists in American history, using weather as her accomplice and patience as her weapon. She set 36 fires and was never caught, never suspected, never punished. And then, after emancipation, she spent 40 years as a firefighter putting out flames to atone for the ones she'd started. This is the story of how one teenage girl learned that fire destroys everything equally, and that sometimes burning down the kingdom is the only way to free the prisoners. The year is 1853. And the Morrison plantation dominates 6,000 acres of Georgia cotton country, 40 miles south of Atlanta. Master Thomas Morrison, age 56, owns 141 enslaved people and is one of the wealthiest planters in the region. His wealth is built on cotton primarily, but also tobacco, both crops highly flammable when stored in wooden warehouses. The plantation operates with 5 overseers who supervise field work with the standard brutality of the era. Morrison is not considered unusually cruel by his peers, but this means nothing because the baseline is horror. People are whipped regularly. Families are separated as punishment. Children are sold away from parents. The 141 enslaved people live in conditions that break bodies and destroy souls, while Morrison and his family live in a 16-room mansion with imported furniture and crystal chandeliers. The Morrison plantation has been profitable for 30 years and shows no signs of declining. Until a 14-year-old girl named Sarah decides to burn it all down one thunderstorm at a time. Sarah is born in August 1839 on the Morrison plantation. Her mother, Rachel, is a field hand who dies when Sarah is 6 years old from complications after being whipped for working too slowly while sick. Sarah's father is never identified. Rachel never spoke of him, and Sarah learns young that some questions have no safe answers. At age 6, motherless and grieving, Sarah is assigned to work in the vegetable gardens doing light labor. At age 10, in 1849, she's reassigned to work in the big house kitchen under the supervision of the head cook, an older enslaved woman named Martha, who has worked in the kitchen for 25 years. Martha teaches Sarah how to manage cooking fires in the massive hearth, how to control flame temperature by adjusting wood placement, how to bank coals overnight, how to start fires quickly, how to extinguish fires safely. Sarah is a quick learner, and by age 12, she's the primary fire manager for the kitchen, responsible for maintaining the hearth fire that burns continuously 6 days a week. She understands fire intimately, how it starts, how it spreads, how it feeds on oxygen and fuel, how wind affects it, how rain affects it, how different materials burn at different rates. Sarah knows fire better than anyone on the plantation, and in June 1853, age 13 approaching 14, Sarah decides to use that knowledge as a weapon. The decision comes after an incident that transforms Sarah's understanding of what's possible. On June 2nd, 1853, a massive thunderstorm strikes the Morrison plantation during late afternoon. Lightning is continuous. Thunder shakes the buildings. Rain falls in sheets. Sarah is in the kitchen preparing evening meal when she hears shouting outside. A lightning bolt has struck one of the smaller tobacco storage barns, setting it ablaze. The barn is 40 feet from the main cluster of buildings, relatively isolated, filled with bundled tobacco worth approximately $3,000. The rain is too heavy for anyone to fight the fire effectively. People watch from covered areas as the barn burns completely to the ground over 30 minutes. Master Morrison is furious about the loss, but there's nothing to be done. Lightning strikes happen. Acts of God. Insurance won't cover it because God's will isn't insurable. The $3,000 loss is significant, but Morrison is wealthy enough to absorb it. Sarah watches the barn burn from the kitchen window and something crystallizes in her mind. Lightning starts fires during storms. Everyone accepts this as natural and unavoidable. But what if some of those lightning fires aren't natural? What if someone who understood fire could set fires during thunderstorms and everyone would assume lightning did it? What if that someone could cause enough fire damage over time to actually hurt Morrison financially? Sarah is 13 years old and she's just conceived a 5-year arson campaign that will destroy nearly $200,000 in property. Sarah spends the next 2 weeks planning meticulously. She needs to understand the plantation layout, the locations of high-value targets, the weather patterns that would provide cover. The Morrison plantation stores cotton in 3 large warehouses located 200 yards apart to minimize risk of fire spreading between them. Each warehouse holds cotton bales worth approximately $15,000 when full. There are 2 tobacco storage barns in addition to the one that just burned, each worth $3,000 to $5,000 when filled. There are 5 overseer houses clustered near the fields, relatively cheap structures but still representing value and, more importantly, representing the overseer's comfort and security. There's Morrison's personal library, a separate building attached to the main house containing 300 books worth thousands of dollars and irreplaceable to Morrison, who values his education and culture. There's the blacksmith shop, the carpenter shop, the stables. Multiple high-value targets spread across 6,000 acres. Sarah can't hit them all, but she can hit enough to cause cumulative financial devastation. And she has the perfect cover: Georgia thunderstorms. June through September is peak thunderstorm season in Georgia. Violent afternoon and evening storms with heavy lightning and rain are common. Sarah just needs to wait for storms and use them. The first deliberate fire comes on June 20th, 1853, 18 days after the natural lightning strike. A thunderstorm builds during late afternoon, classic summer pattern. Dark clouds, distant thunder, then rapid intensification. By 6 p.m., the storm is directly overhead with continuous lightning and heavy rain. Sarah is in the kitchen preparing dinner, but everyone's attention is on the storm. She tells Martha she needs to use the outhouse. Martha barely acknowledges, focused on protecting food from rain leaking through the roof. Sarah goes outside into the storm. The rain is heavy enough that visibility is poor. Lightning and thunder are constant. Sarah has prepared for this moment by hiding materials earlier in the day. A small clay pot containing live coals from the kitchen fire, protected from rain by oilcloth wrapping, hidden near the kitchen door. She retrieves the pot, wraps her shawl around it to protect it further, and moves quickly through the rain toward the nearest cotton warehouse, about 100 yards from the kitchen. The warehouse is a massive wooden structure, walls and roof filled with cotton bales. Sarah knows from working in the kitchen that cotton is extremely flammable when dry. The warehouse has ventilation gaps near the roof to prevent moisture buildup, which means the cotton inside stays relatively dry even during rain. Sarah reaches the warehouse, checks that no one is nearby, the rain and storm noise providing cover. She finds the door, It's unlocked because who locks doors during storms when everyone's sheltering? Inside is darkness and the smell of cotton and dry wood. Sarah moves to a corner stacked with cotton bales. She opens her pot of coals, selects several that are glowing red, and places them carefully against the base of a cotton bale, arranging loose cotton fibers around them to catch. The coals are hot enough to ignite dry cotton despite ambient moisture. Sarah watches for 30 seconds until small flames begin spreading up the cotton bale. She closes her pot, rewraps it, and exits the warehouse back into the rain. The storm is still raging. Lightning strikes somewhere nearby, thunder immediate. Sarah returns to the kitchen, hides her pot back in its spot, and enters the kitchen, soaked from rain. Martha scolds her for being outside so long, but Sarah explains she got disoriented in the rain. Martha accepts this, and they continue dinner preparation. 20 minutes later, smoke is visible from the cotton warehouse. By the time anyone responds, flames are spreading rapidly through the structure. The rain isn't heavy enough to extinguish a fire that's already caught in cotton stored in a covered building. The warehouse burns completely. $15,000 in cotton destroyed. Everyone assumes lightning struck the warehouse during the storm. Sarah says nothing. She is 14 years old and has just committed her first successful arson. Sarah waits 6 weeks before the second fire. Patience is crucial. Fires too close together might raise suspicion despite the lightning cover. In early August 1853, another major thunderstorm strikes during evening. Sarah uses the same method: live coals in a pot, movement during storm chaos, target a tobacco barn this time for variety. The barn burns. $4,000 in tobacco destroyed. Blamed on lightning. Sarah waits 5 more weeks. September thunderstorm. Third fire targets the second cotton warehouse. $15,000 destroyed. Blamed on lightning. 3 fires in 4 months. $34,000 in damage. Morrison is beginning to complain about his terrible luck with lightning strikes, but hasn't yet questioned whether it's actually lightning. The plantation is still profitable. The losses hurt, but Morrison can absorb them. Sarah knows she needs to be more aggressive. Over the next 5 years, she accelerates her campaign. Between September 1853 and November 1858, Sarah sets 33 more fires during thunderstorms, each one unique in execution and consequence. The fires aren't evenly spaced. They cluster during Georgia's storm season from May through September and pause during winter months when thunderstorms are rare. The targets vary deliberately to avoid obvious patterns that might raise suspicion beyond bad luck. Fire number 4 comes in October 1853, targeting the third and final cotton warehouse. This warehouse is the newest structure, built with better fire prevention, including metal roof sections. Sarah adapts by starting the fire inside wooden support beams rather than cotton bales, knowing the structural fire will collapse the metal roof inward, trapping heat and ensuring total destruction. The technique works perfectly. $18,000 in cotton and building destroyed. Morrison begins installing lightning rods on all major structures, expensive copper rods meant to divert lightning strikes safely to ground. Sarah studies these installations and learns they're useless against fires started inside buildings. Fire number 5 targets Overseer William Harper's house in June 1854. Harper is the cruelest of Morrison's 5 overseers, known for whipping women and beating children. Sarah watches the house for weeks, learning Harper's schedule. On June 19th, an evening thunderstorm strikes while Harper is drinking at another overseer's house 2 miles away. Sarah approaches Harper's house during the storm's peak, lightning constant, rain heavy. The house is small, wood construction. Harper's possessions inside, including clothes, furniture, and a lockbox containing money he's saved. Sarah doesn't enter the house. She starts the fire from outside by placing coals against the wooden wall in a corner sheltered from the rain by the roof overhang. The fire catches in the dry wood, spreads up the wall to the roof. Within 20 minutes, the house is engulfed. Harper returns to find his home destroyed, everything he owns gone. Morrison rebuilds the house because overseers need housing, but Harper is shaken. He quits 3 months later, citing the plantation's curse as his reason. Sarah watches him leave and feels satisfaction. One overseer driven away without killing anyone. Fire number 7 in July 1854 destroys the carpenter shop, a critical loss. The shop contains tools worth over $4,000: saws, planes, chisels, measuring equipment, wood stores. The plantation's carpenter, an enslaved man named James, who is 53 years old, has worked in that shop for 25 years. The fire burns everything. James watches his workshop burn with visible grief, not for Morrison's loss, but for his own craft destroyed. Sarah feels unexpected guilt watching James's reaction. She burned Morrison's property, but also destroyed a black craftsman's workspace. The moral complexity of this haunts her. Morrison rebuilds the shop and replaces tools over 6 months at enormous expense. The James is never the same, his pride damaged along with his workspace. Fire number 10 in September 1855 targets Morrison's library, the most personally devastating attack Sarah ever launches. Morrison's library is his pride. 300 books collected over 30 years representing his education and cultured identity. The library is a separate building attached to the main house, wood construction with floor-to-ceiling shelves. On September 7, 1855, during a violent evening thunderstorm, Sarah starts a fire in the library using her coal method, targeting the wooden shelves first, knowing they'll catch quickly. The fire spreads through the library, consuming books, shelves, everything. Morrison arrives too late to save anything. The financial loss is perhaps $5,000, but the emotional loss is incalculable. Morrison stands in the rain watching his library burn, and Sarah sees him cry, the only time she ever sees him show that emotion. Books cannot be replaced like cotton or tobacco. Many of Morrison's books were unique or rare. Their destruction breaks something in Morrison's spirit. Sarah watches from the kitchen window and feels both satisfaction and disturbing guilt. She destroyed a man's passion, not just his profit. Fires 11 through 20 between late 1855 and through 1856 target systematically. 2 more overseer houses, rebuilt tobacco barns, storage sheds, a stable, equipment buildings. Each fire during a storm, each blamed on lightning. By 1856, Morrison is spending more money on rebuilding than he's earning from crops. His finances are deteriorating. Insurance companies have refused to continue covering his property, stating that the frequency of lightning strikes exceeds natural probability, and they suspect either divine punishment or something unexplained. Morrison begins consulting religious leaders, convinced God is punishing him, though he can't determine why. A Baptist minister suggests Morrison might be too harsh with his enslaved people, and God is showing displeasure. Morrison ignores this advice and becomes more paranoid, installing more lightning rods that don't help, building stone walls around wooden structures thinking stone won't burn, hiring night watchmen during storms, which Sarah simply waits out until the watchmen seek shelter from heavy rain. Fire number 23 in August 1856 nearly ends Sarah's campaign through discovery. She's setting fire to a storage shed during a storm when lightning strikes a tree 50 feet away, the thunder instantaneous and deafening, the flash blinding. Sarah is knocked down by the shockwave, drops her pot of coals. The coals spill on the ground, most extinguished by rain, but some still glowing. Sarah scrambles to gather them in darkness and rain, cuts her hand on the broken pot, bleeds while trying to hide evidence. She abandons the shed fire, runs back to kitchen with a bleeding hand and no coals. In the kitchen, Martha sees the blood. "Child, what happened?" Sarah says she cut herself on broken pottery in the kitchen during the thunder and lightning chaos. Martha bandages the hand, scolds her for being careless. Sarah's heart pounds for hours. She came within seconds of being caught with coals outside during a fire. She waits 3 months before setting another fire, the longest pause in her campaign, letting fear subside. Fire number 31 in April 1857 creates the overseer injury that haunts Sarah most. She targets overseer James Harris's house, believing Harris is away visiting family in a neighboring county. She starts the fire during a nighttime storm, technique perfected, coals against the wooden wall, flames spreading quickly. She returns to kitchen thinking Harris is safely elsewhere. But Harris is actually inside, came back early, was sleeping when the fire started. Harris wakes to flames and smoke, escapes through a window, but his hands and arms are badly burned from pushing through burning wood. He survives, but the burns are severe, blistering, and infected. Sarah watches Harris suffer for weeks, his hands wrapped in bandages, his pain obvious. She didn't intend this. She thought the house was empty. But her intelligence was wrong, and a man is permanently scarred because of it. Harris eventually recovers enough to work, but his hands never fully heal, always painful, limiting his ability to use whips effectively, which ironically makes him less dangerous to enslaved people. Sarah tells herself this is a positive outcome, but can't escape guilt over causing human suffering directly rather than just property damage. But Sarah's campaign is not without close calls and complications. In July 1855, after burning the blacksmith shop, Sarah is returning to the kitchen through heavy rain when she encounters overseer William Stone, who is also moving through the storm. Stone grabs her arm roughly. "Where you been, girl? Kitchen fire needs tending." Sarah thinks quickly. "Privy, sir. Had to go badly." Stone examines her soaked clothes, suspicious, but with no proof of anything except that she was outside during a storm. He releases her arm with a shove. "Get back to work." Sarah continues to the kitchen, heart pounding, realizing that one person seeing her in the wrong place at the wrong time could unravel everything. She becomes even more careful after this, timing her movements more precisely, creating better excuses. In September 1856, a fire she sets in a rebuilt tobacco barn spreads more quickly than anticipated due to unexpectedly strong winds. The barn is located only 60 feet from a group of slave cabins. Flames spread toward the cabins. Enslaved people, including Sarah, rush to fight the fire to protect their homes. The storm's rain eventually helps extinguish flames before the cabins catch, but it's terrifyingly close. Sarah realizes that her fires endanger enslaved people as well as Morrison's property. She begins selecting targets more carefully, avoiding anything close to slave quarters. The moral complexity of this realization weighs on her. She's burning property to hurt Morrison financially, but property fires can spread to people's homes. She accepts this risk but tries to minimize it. The psychological toll on Sarah escalates over 5 years. The first fire made her vomit afterward from fear and adrenaline. By the 10th fire, she's calm during execution but anxious for days afterward, waiting to see if anyone suspects her. By the 20th fire, she's developed a system that feels almost routine. Wait for storm, prepare coals, move during chaos, set fire, return, hide evidence. But routine doesn't eliminate stress. Sarah lives for 5 years knowing that discovery means death. Not simple death, but torture and execution as a warning to other enslaved people. She watches Morrison grow increasingly paranoid and financially stressed, which pleases her. She watches overseers become nervous about working on a plantation where buildings burn constantly, which pleases her. She watches the plantation's reputation suffer as word spreads that Morrison's land is cursed, which pleases her, but she also carries guilt. In 1857, an overseer named James Harris is sleeping in his house when Sarah sets it on fire during a storm. Harris escapes but is badly burned on his hands and arms. He survives, but is permanently scarred and partially disabled. Sarah didn't intend to hurt him directly, thought he was away, but her intelligence was wrong. She watches Harris suffer for weeks and knows she caused it. The guilt joins the fear, joins the satisfaction in a psychological mix that would break most adults. Sarah is 16 years old, managing emotions she can barely process. By November 1858, 5 years into her campaign, Sarah has set 36 fires, causing approximately $180,000 in cumulative damage. This is catastrophic. Morrison's plantation, once profitable, is now financially unstable. Insurance doesn't cover acts of God, so Morrison has absorbed every loss personally. He's had to borrow money to rebuild essential structures multiple times. His cotton and tobacco crops are still producing, but the constant rebuilding costs are consuming profits. Morrison's creditors are becoming nervous. His reputation is damaged because other planters see his curse as a liability and avoid business relationships. Overseers are harder to hire because 5 have had their houses burned down and 1 was injured. The plantation is not yet bankrupt, but it's approaching that threshold. Sarah knows she needs one more push to break Morrison completely. In November 1858, a massive thunderstorm strikes the plantation during the evening. This is unusual. November storms are less common than summer storms. Sarah sees it as an opportunity she can't waste. The main cotton warehouse has been rebuilt again after burning twice previously. It's currently full of the year's cotton harvest, approximately $20,000 in value. Destroying it now, just before Morrison planned to ship and sell the cotton, would be devastating. Sarah prepares her materials. The storm is violent, wind and rain and constant lightning. She moves through the chaos to the warehouse, sets her fire with practiced precision, returns to the kitchen. 30 minutes later, the warehouse is engulfed. The storm prevents effective firefighting. $20,000 in cotton burns completely. Morrison watches from the shelter of his house, rain pouring down, his face visible in the firelight showing absolute defeat. This is the moment Morrison breaks financially and psychologically. Within a week, he contacts creditors and declares he cannot continue operating the plantation. His debts exceed his assets. The plantation must be liquidated. The liquidation process takes 3 months. Morrison's creditors seize the land and remaining property. The 141 enslaved people are the most valuable remaining assets. But liquidation sales attract buyers looking for bargains, and many buyers at this particular sale are known to be less brutal owners or even abolition sympathizers who purchase enslaved people with intention of eventual freedom. Additionally, the plantation's terrible reputation as cursed makes some buyers nervous, affecting prices. When the sale concludes in February 1859, the 141 enslaved people are dispersed to 23 different buyers across 4 states. This might seem like a tragedy, families separated, but the alternative was remaining under Morrison's ownership. Many of the new owners are indeed less brutal. Several are documented abolitionists who manumit the people they purchased within months. Others are small farmers who can only afford 1 or 2 people and tend to work alongside them rather than maintaining overseer systems. The dispersal is not freedom for everyone, but it's improved circumstances for most and actual freedom for some. Sarah, age 19 in February 1859, is sold to a small farmer in northern Georgia named William Cross, who owns 40 acres and purchases only Sarah to help his wife with domestic work. Cross is not an abolitionist, but he's also not a plantation master. Sarah's life under Cross is significantly better than under Morrison. Less violence, more food, lighter work, some basic respect. Sarah lives with the Cross family for 6 years until the Civil War ends slavery in 1865. She is manumitted at age 26 and finally free after 26 years enslaved. But freedom brings unexpected complications for Sarah. She moves to Atlanta in 1865 looking for work. Atlanta is rebuilding after being burned by Sherman during the war. The irony is not lost on Sarah. A city destroyed by fire being rebuilt while she, an arsonist, seeks work. Sarah finds employment with various families doing domestic work. She lives quietly, keeps to herself, never mentions her past. But the nightmares start shortly after gaining freedom. Sarah dreams about the 36 fires she set. She sees flames spreading through warehouses, tobacco barns, houses. She sees Overseer James Harris with burned hands. She sees enslaved people's cabins nearly catching fire. She sees Morrison's face watching his cotton warehouse burn. The dreams wake her gasping, certain she smells smoke. During the day, Sarah functions normally, but inside she's wrestling with guilt that intensifies rather than diminishes with time. When she was enslaved and setting fires, she felt justified. Morrison deserved it. The plantation deserved destruction. But now, with distance and freedom, Sarah sees complexity she couldn't process during the campaign. She destroyed property, but also endangered people. She bankrupted Morrison, but also caused dispersal of families. She created change, but at enormous cost. The moral clarity she felt at 14 is gone at 27. In 1868, 3 years after emancipation, Sarah makes a decision that will define the rest of her life. She's going to become a firefighter. The decision seems contradictory, but makes perfect sense to Sarah. She spent 5 years starting fires. She'll spend the rest of her life stopping them. It's not redemption, exactly. She doesn't believe she deserves redemption. But it's atonement. It's balance. It's using her understanding of fire for protection instead of destruction. The problem is that no fire brigade in Atlanta will hire a black woman in 1868. Firefighting is exclusively white and male. Sarah adapts. She begins volunteering at fire sites, showing up when buildings burn and helping however she can. She brings water, helps evacuate people, assists with debris removal. After 6 months of consistent volunteering, the captain of Atlanta's 2nd Fire Brigade, a man named Thomas Reed, notices her. Reed is unusual for his time. He's a Union veteran who returned to Atlanta with more progressive views than most white Southerners. He's impressed by Sarah's knowledge of fire behavior, her understanding of how flames spread and how to fight them. In January 1869, Reed makes Sarah an informal offer. She can work with the brigade unofficially. She won't be paid officially, won't wear a uniform, won't be listed on rolls, but she can respond to fires with them and assist. Sarah accepts immediately. For the next 2 years, she works unpaid as an unofficial firefighter, learning professional techniques, proving herself competent. In 1871, after 3 years of consistent service, Reed hires her officially as the first black female firefighter in Atlanta's history. She's paid half what white male firefighters earn, but she doesn't care. She's fighting fires professionally. Sarah works as a firefighter for 40 years, from 1869 unofficial and 1871 official until 1909 when she retires at age 70. During those 40 years, she responds to thousands of fires in Atlanta and surrounding areas, each one a complex negotiation with guilt and purpose. Her first major fire as an official firefighter comes in April 1871, 3 months after being hired officially. A boarding house catches fire in downtown Atlanta. 4 stories, 50 residents, evening fire during dinner time. The fire started in the kitchen, spreading rapidly up wooden stairs. Sarah arrives with 2nd Brigade, sees flames consuming the building, hears screaming from upper floors. Without hesitation, Sarah enters the burning building, climbs smoke-filled stairs she can barely see through, reaches the 3rd floor where a family of 4 is trapped. Mother, father, 2 children, ages 5 and 7. The father has been overcome by smoke, unconscious. Sarah helps the mother get children to the window where a ladder reaches them. Then Sarah drags the unconscious father through smoke to the same window, her lungs burning, her eyes streaming, her knowledge of fire behavior telling her they have perhaps 90 seconds before the stairs collapse. They make it. The family survives. Sarah emerges from the building coughing violently, her face black with soot, her hands burned from grabbing hot wood. Captain Reed tells her she's insane for entering a burning building without orders. But he also tells her she saved 4 lives, and he's proud of her. Sarah sits on the curb after the fire, watching the building burn, and thinks, "This is what I destroyed 36 times. This is the terror I created." The family she saved thanks her repeatedly. Sarah accepts their thanks, but inside she's thinking about the fires she set that might have trapped people similarly, the terror she caused, the grace that no one died in her arsons except indirectly. This cognitive dissonance defines her entire firefighting career, celebrated for stopping fires while carrying guilt for starting them. In December 1873, Sarah responds to a warehouse fire during a thunderstorm. Lightning has actually struck the warehouse, igniting stored goods. The irony is overwhelming. Sarah spent 5 years setting fires during thunderstorms and blaming lightning. Now she's fighting an actual lightning strike fire. The warehouse contains dry goods and textiles, highly flammable. The fire is spreading rapidly despite heavy rain. Sarah works with her brigade to contain the fire, prevent spread to adjacent buildings. During the fight, Sarah has a moment of clarity standing in the rain, watching flames consume the warehouse. This is exactly what her fires looked like. This destruction she caused 36 times. The warehouse owner stands nearby, devastated, watching his livelihood burn. Sarah sees him and thinks about Morrison watching his properties burn, about the emotional devastation she caused repeatedly. After the fire is controlled, the owner approaches Sarah and thanks her for preventing the fire from spreading to his other properties nearby. He's lost this warehouse, but saved the others because of the firefighters' quick action. Sarah accepts his thanks and thinks, "I spent 5 years destroying. I'm spending my life protecting. Can one balance the other?" She has no answer. In March 1879, Sarah responds to a residential fire in a black neighborhood in Atlanta. A family's home is burning, started by a cooking fire that got out of control. Sarah arrives to find the house fully engulfed. The family, a woman named Rachel and her 3 children, standing outside, sobbing. Rachel tells Sarah her husband is still inside, went back for something, hasn't emerged. Without waiting for orders, Sarah enters the burning house. The interior is an inferno, heat unbearable, smoke blinding. Sarah moves through the space using her knowledge of fire behavior, understanding where flames will be hottest, where structure will fail first, where a person might be trapped. She finds the husband, unconscious from smoke inhalation, in what remains of a back room. She drags him out through collapsing structure, emerges from the house seconds before the roof collapses inward. The man survives. Rachel embraces Sarah, crying, thanking her, calling her a hero. Sarah accepts the embrace but feels fraudulent. She saved 1 man today, but how many did she endanger during her arson campaign? The mathematics of harm and heroism are impossible to calculate. Captain Reed writes a commendation for Sarah's bravery. Sarah files it away and never looks at it again. In June 1885, 27 years after her last arson, Sarah fights a fire that transforms her understanding of her past. A cotton warehouse catches fire during a thunderstorm, lightning strike igniting the building. Sarah responds with her brigade. The warehouse is identical to the ones she burned on Morrison Plantation. Wooden structure, cotton bales, fire spreading rapidly through flammable material. Sarah fights this fire with particular intensity, working harder than anyone else, directing water to most effective locations, predicting fire spread patterns with uncanny accuracy. Her brigade contains the fire, saves half the building and most of the cotton. After the fire, the warehouse owner approaches Sarah specifically to thank her, saying her expertise saved him from total loss. Sarah stands in the rain, soaked and exhausted, and asks the owner, "How much would you have lost if the whole warehouse burned?" Owner replies, "Perhaps $20,000. But you saved most of it. Maybe I lost $4,000. Sarah thinks, I caused $15,000 to $20,000 losses like this multiple times, deliberately. And today, I prevented that same loss for someone else. The moral mathematics shift slightly in her mind. She can never undo what she did, but she can prevent similar losses for others. Each fire she stops is a small payment against the debt of 36 fires she started. Throughout 40 years, Sarah faces constant racism and sexism. White firefighters refuse to work with her initially. Some sabotage her equipment, hide her gear, make her work impossible. Sarah persists through all of it with quiet determination, never complaining, never retaliating, simply doing her job better than anyone expects. Gradually, competence overcomes prejudice. By 1880, after 9 years, most of her brigade respects her abilities, even if they don't respect her as a person. By 1890, after 19 years, younger firefighters who grew up knowing her reputation treat her as a mentor. By 1900, after 29 years, she's a legend in Atlanta firefighting. The woman who knows fire better than anyone, who can read flames like text, who saves lives others would consider lost. No one knows why she understands fire so intimately. Her colleagues assume experience. The truth is that she learned by starting 36 fires, observing how flames spread, understanding ignition and fuel and oxygen from the arsonist's perspective. Her criminal knowledge makes her the best firefighter, but revealing this would destroy her. So Sarah maintains silence, accepts praise she doesn't believe she deserves, and fights fires with an intensity born from guilt. By the early 1900s, Sarah is in her 60s, still fighting fires, still atoning. In 1904, age 65, she responds to a fire at a school. The school is brick construction, but the interior is wood, and the fire is spreading through classrooms. It's evening. School is empty of students, but the principal and 2 teachers are inside working late. Sarah and her brigade arrive to find the building full of smoke, the 3 people trapped on the 2nd floor. Sarah, despite her age, climbs the ladder truck to the 2nd floor window, helps the 3 people evacuate to safety. Coming down the ladder, Sarah loses her footing, falls 15 feet to the ground, breaks her arm. She's 65 years old and has just sustained her most serious injury in 35 years of firefighting. During recovery, Sarah contemplates retirement but decides against it. She's not done atoning. The broken arm heals imperfectly. She has reduced mobility for the rest of her life. But she returns to firefighting within 3 months, working with one arm less functional than before, refusing to let injury end her career. Sarah finally retires in 1909 at age 70 after 40 years of service. From 1869 to 1909, longer than most firefighters serve. The retirement ceremony is held at the fire station. White and black firefighters attend, unusual for segregated Atlanta. Captain Thomas Reed has long since died, but his successor, Captain William Morrison, no relation to Plantation Morrison, speaks about Sarah's legacy. He notes that Sarah has fought more fires than almost anyone in Atlanta's history, saved dozens of lives personally, trained multiple generations of firefighters, and served with distinction, despite facing discrimination that would have broken most people. Sarah sits listening to this praise and thinks about what they don't know. That she's fought fires with such intensity because she started 36 fires as a teenager. That her knowledge comes from arson. That her dedication comes from guilt. That she's not a hero, but a criminal trying to atone. After the ceremony, younger black firefighters approach her, thanking her for paving the way for them, calling her a pioneer. Sarah accepts their thanks but feels fraudulent. She didn't become a firefighter to pioneer anything. She did it to balance moral scales that will never fully balance. The guilt never leaves, but it evolves. In 1885, 27 years after her last arson, Sarah responds to a warehouse fire during a thunderstorm. Lightning has struck the warehouse and the building is burning. Sarah fights the fire alongside her brigade, working in rain and wind identical to conditions she used to use as cover for arson. After the fire is extinguished, Sarah stands in the rain staring at the burned warehouse and has a revelation. This is what her fires looked like from the other side. This is the destruction she caused 36 times. The warehouse is gutted, the owner devastated, workers worried about jobs. Sarah helped minimize the damage this time, but she caused identical damage 36 times before. The weight of this realization sits on her chest for days. But she also realizes that her firefighting work has prevented more damage than her arson caused. 40 years of fires prevented, lives saved, property protected. The mathematics are complicated, but she's caused less destruction as a firefighter than she caused as an arsonist. This doesn't remove guilt, but provides something like purpose. In 1906, Sarah is 67 years old and has been fighting fires for 37 years. A young black journalist named Marcus Williams is writing a series about notable black firefighters in Atlanta's history. He interviews Sarah extensively. During the interviews, Sarah carefully avoids mentioning her past beyond saying she grew up enslaved in Georgia. Williams asks why she became a firefighter. Sarah answers, "Fire destroys everything equally. Rich or poor, white or black, fire doesn't care. Fighting fire is the most honest work there is." Williams publishes the interview praising Sarah as a pioneer. Sarah reads the article and thinks about what she didn't say. That she knows fire destroys equally because she used fire as a weapon. That she became a firefighter because she needed to atone for 36 arsons. That fighting fires is honest work, but her reasons for doing it are complicated. In 1908, age 69, Sarah decides she needs to tell someone the truth before she dies. She contacts a black minister named Reverend James Cooper, who has gained trust in Atlanta's black community as someone who documents histories of formerly enslaved people. Over 3 days in September 1908, Sarah tells Reverend Cooper everything. 36 fires between 1853 and 1858. Every thunderstorm used as cover. $180,000 in damage. Morrison bankrupted. 141 enslaved people dispersed. Overseer James Harris burned. 40 years as firefighter in atonement. She asks Cooper, "Was I right to burn it all down? Was I wrong to spend 40 years putting fires out? Are both things true?" Cooper has no simple answer. He writes down Sarah's confession in detail and promises to preserve it but not publish it during her lifetime. Sarah retires from firefighting in 1909 at age 70 after 40 years of service. She's recognized at a retirement ceremony where white and black firefighters both acknowledge her contributions despite the racism she faced throughout her career. No one mentions that she's fought more fires than almost anyone else in Atlanta's history. No one knows why she fought them with such intensity. Sarah spends her final years living quietly in Atlanta, supported by a small pension from the fire brigade and assistance from former colleagues. She never marries, has no children, lives alone with her memories of fire. She dies November 3, 1913, age 74. Her funeral is attended by dozens of firefighters who honor her as a pioneer. Reverend Cooper keeps his promise and doesn't publish Sarah's confession during her lifetime. In 1915, 2 years after Sarah's death, Cooper publishes her story in a book of oral histories titled Voices from Bondage and Freedom. The book circulates in black communities but is largely ignored by white historians who dismiss it as exaggerated. How could a 14-year-old girl set 36 fires over 5 years during thunderstorms without ever being caught? The story seemed impossible. But modern historians have verified substantial parts of Sarah's account. Records from the Morrison plantation and surrounding areas document an extraordinary series of fires between 1853 and 1858. Insurance company records list Morrison as filing claims for numerous fires, all attributed to lightning strikes. Local newspaper articles from the era mention the Morrison plantation's remarkable bad luck with lightning. Financial records show Morrison declaring bankruptcy in 1858. Liquidation documents confirm 141 enslaved people were sold to 23 buyers in February 1859. Atlanta Fire Brigade records confirm a woman named Sarah worked as a firefighter from 1871 to 1909, unusual for the era. The statistical analysis is compelling. 36 documented fires on one plantation over 5 years is far beyond natural lightning strike probability. The conclusion of historians who've studied the case is that Sarah's confession is substantially true. She likely did set 36 fires during her youth using thunderstorms as cover. The method she described is plausible. The opportunity existed. The motive is obvious. And the results? Morrison's bankruptcy and the dispersal of enslaved people actually occurred. Sarah was probably telling the truth. She was one of the most successful arsonists in American history, who then became one of the most dedicated firefighters as atonement. The moral implications resist simple judgment. Sarah committed 36 arsons, causing $180,000 in damage. Arson is serious crime regardless of target or justification. One person, Overseer James Harris, was permanently injured. The fires endangered enslaved people's homes and lives, even though Sarah tried to minimize this risk. The destruction was real and significant. But Sarah was enslaved from birth to age 26. She lived under a system of total oppression with no legal recourse against violence. The property she destroyed belonged to people who claimed ownership of human beings. Her arsons bankrupted Morrison and led to dispersal that improved circumstances for many of the 141 enslaved people, even if it didn't free everyone. And Sarah spent 40 years fighting fires as atonement, saving lives and property far exceeding what she destroyed. The mathematics of harm and good are impossible to calculate cleanly, but what's undeniable is that Sarah's campaign worked. Morrison's plantation, once profitable, was destroyed financially. 141 people's circumstances changed, many for the better. And Sarah carried guilt for 60 years, first as arsonist, then as firefighter trying to atone. She never claimed righteousness or redemption. She simply did what she thought necessary and then spent the rest of her life trying to balance the scales. Sarah's grave exists in Atlanta in a cemetery for black residents. The marker reads, Sarah Cross, 1839 to 1913. Firefighter for 40 years. She saved what she could. The simple inscription doesn't mention Morrison Plantation or 36 fires or atonement. But Reverend Cooper's book preserves the truth. And the truth is that a 14-year-old enslaved girl learned fire could destroy the system that enslaved her, set 36 fires during thunderstorms over 5 years, bankrupted a plantation, and then spent 40 years putting out fires to atone for the ones she started. Remember Sarah. Remember that she was 14 when she started, 19 when she stopped. Remember that she used weather as accomplice and patience as weapon. Remember that 36 fires blamed on lightning were actually set by a girl who understood fire better than anyone suspected. Remember that she injured one man and endangered many, but also freed or improved circumstances for 141 people. Remember that she spent 40 years fighting fires as atonement and saved more than she destroyed. Remember that she asked on her deathbed whether she was right or wrong and accepted that both might be true. Remember that fire destroys equally and that sometimes burning down the kingdom is the only way to free the prisoners. The Morrison Plantation is gone, burned repeatedly and bankrupted and liquidated. But Sarah's story remains, a story about a girl and fire and weather and 36 deliberate destructions disguised as acts of God. A story about 5 years destroying and 40 years building. A story about balance and atonement and guilt carried for 60 years. Remember it.